The Sunday school lesson for July the 9th, 2023 is Accept God's Invitation. Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 11, and verses 15 through 24. Welcome, subscribers and viewers, to my channel, The Backstory. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that you will become aware of the events that take place before each Sunday school lesson. I will share the backstory, read the lesson text, and offer a brief lesson summary. The backstory. Let's begin. This backstory begins when Jesus was at a Pharisee's house. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. The narrative continues with a question and no answer. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Another question and no answer. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. The Sunday school lesson begins with the next verse. Accept God's invitation. Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 11, and verses 15 through 24. Time, AD 30, place, Perea. Golden text. And the Lord said unto the servant, "Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled." Luke chapter 14, verse 23. Verse 7, and he put forth a parable to those which were bidden, when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, "When thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him." Verse 9, and he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, "Give this man place," and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. Verse 10, but when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, "Friend, go up higher." Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Verse 11, for whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Verse 15, and when one of them that sat at meat with him heard these things, he said unto him, "Blessed is he that shall eat bread in the kingdom of God." Verse 16, then said he unto him, "A certain man made a great supper, and bade many." Verse 17, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, "Come, for all things are now ready." Verse 18, and they all with one consent began to make excuse. The first said unto him, "I have bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go and see it. I pray thee have me excused." Verse 19, and another said, "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee have me excused." Verse 20, and another said, "I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come." Verse 21, so that servant came and shewed his Lord these things. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor, and the maimed, and the halt, and the blind. Verse 22. And the servant said, Lord, it is done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. Verse 23. And the Lord said unto the servant, Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. Verse 24. For I say unto you, that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. A brief summary. Two cultural ideas must be understood here. First, to eat with someone signified approval of that person, and to refuse to eat with someone was a sign of rejection. Jesus knew that his invitation to the house of a prominent Pharisee was not an honor, but a sham. Jesus was being set up. The guests carefully watched him. Again, he was put in a position to break the Sabbath by healing. Second, people of that day were very mindful of the concept of shame. The shame of public humiliation would fall on the entire family and perhaps on an entire village. Matthew chapter 1 verse 19. Jesus' image of a man assuming a place of honor at a banquet only to be given the least important place would have made his hearers cringe. Jesus followed with a parable aimed at the snobbish guests and hosts who had invited him. They saw themselves as God's honored guests, but were sorely mistaken. It would have been typical for a host to send out invitations in advance to know how much food to prepare. Then, when the banquet was ready, the invitation to come and eat was sent to those who had already agreed to attend. The idea that those guests would refuse the invitation at that point would have been seen as a terrible insult. Jesus was implying that the Pharisees and others were invited by God to partake in his glory, but had insulted him by rejecting Jesus. What is more, the thought that the arrogant religious leaders would be placed by those whom they considered riffraff was an insult to them. They had seen Jesus' association with society's outcasts as his poor judgment, but now they recognized that Jesus meant it as a sign of their own unworthiness. Thank you so much for watching. Join me soon for the next backstory. Stay safe and may God bless.